I'm standing at a crosswalk in Munich at 2:47 a.m. There hasn't been a car for 20 minutes. The street is so empty you could host a yoga class on the asphalt. But the little red man is still glowing, and 15 Germans are standing here like they're waiting for the rapture. Then this American tourist jogs up, looks both ways once, and bolts across the empty intersection while announcing to nobody in particular. In America, we call this efficiency. One elderly woman actually gasped. Another guy shook his head with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for funerals. The American made it across alive, obviously, turned around and shouted back, "See? That's how you save time," as if he'd just discovered fire. A German woman near me muttered under her breath, "Ja, very impressive. Now the children have learned to break laws." The American was already halfway down the block, probably convinced he'd just taught an entire nation about innovation. That interaction lasted 45 seconds, but it perfectly captures what happens when American confidence collides with German Ordnung. Americans arrive here thinking rules are suggestions with enforcement issues. Germans have built an entire civilization on the principle that rules exist for everyone, all the time, regardless of convenience. The result is a beautiful disaster of cultural incompatibility, where one side thinks they're teaching efficiency and the other side thinks they're witnessing the collapse of civilization over a traffic light. I work as a tour coordinator in Berlin, which means I spend my days watching Americans discover that Germany doesn't operate on vibes and personal convenience. They show up expecting flexibility, spontaneity, and the freedom to improvise. They find a country where knocking before entering a room is legally mandated, where quiet hours are enforced by law, and where putting a glass bottle in the paper recycling bin can genuinely strain neighborly relations for years. The Americans think the Germans are being uptight. The Germans think the Americans are being children. Both sides are convinced they're obviously correct, and neither will ever back down. The best part is watching Americans double down when corrected. A German will explain, with infinite patience, why something works a certain way. The American will nod, absorb exactly zero information, and then explain why their way is actually better because of something they half remember from a business podcast. The German's face doesn't change, but you can see their soul leave their body. I've watched this same interaction play out in restaurants, train stations, apartment buildings, and once, memorably, at a public sauna where an American tried to explain that actually, swimsuits are more hygienic. The German just stared until the American put his phone away and left. What follows are real interactions I've witnessed, overheard, or had reported to me by exhausted Germans who just wanted to buy groceries without explaining their entire cultural framework. These are the moments where American individualism meets German collective responsibility, and nobody walks away happy. A Chicago management consultant checks into a pension in Hamburg, drops his bags, and immediately starts making phone calls at 11 p.m. His voice carries through the paper-thin walls as he conducts what sounds like a quarterly review with someone in California. By 11:15, there's a knock at his door. The landlady explains that quiet hours start at 10 p.m., and loud conversations aren't permitted. He responds with, "Oh, I'll keep it down," and goes right back to his call at exactly the same volume. By 11:30, she's back. She explains again, more firmly, that this is Reheziat, a legally protected quiet period. He says, and I quote, "I'm paying for this room, so technically I can use it however I want." That's how property rights work in a free society. The landlady stares at him with the expression of someone watching a seagull eat a cigarette butt. She informs him that in Germany, your right to make noise ends where your neighbor's right to sleep begins. He launches into an explanation about how in America, people respect individual freedom and don't let neighbors dictate their lifestyle. She waits for him to finish, then says, "You may leave tomorrow if you cannot follow the house rules." He complains on TripAdvisor that German hospitality is authoritarian. The landlady frames the review and hangs it in her office. At a business dinner in Frankfurt, a New York sales director joins his German colleagues at a restaurant. Everyone receives their drinks, beer for most, water for 2 people. The American immediately takes a massive gulp of his beer, while everyone else just holds their glasses. One of the Germans clears his throat and suggests they wait for everyone to be ready for a toast. The American laughs and says, "Oh, we don't need to do a whole ceremony about it. The beer's here, I'm thirsty, that's how drinking works." He takes another drink. The Germans exchange glances that communicate 3 generations of disappointment. When the food arrives, the German managing director raises his glass and says, "Prost," making eye contact with each person as they clink glasses. The American has already finished his beer and is signaling the waiter for another. Later, when the contract negotiations stall, he genuinely cannot understand why the Germans seem weirdly cold. His colleague explains that he violated approximately 6 cultural norms before the appetizers arrive. He responds, "That's the problem with Europe, too many rules about nothing." He flies home without the contract. The Frankfurt office has a beer about it. A California tech worker moves into an apartment building in Dusseldorf and immediately treats the communal trash area like a suggestion box. He tosses everything into the black Restmüll container because he reasons that someone probably sorts it later anyway. By week 2, he finds a passive-aggressive note on his door explaining the color-coded recycling system: blue for paper, yellow for plastics, brown for bio-waste, green or white for glass separated by color. He reads it, laughs, and thinks this is a joke. Week 3, his neighbor intercepts him at the bins and provides a live demonstration of proper waste separation. He responds with, "Honestly, this is why America is more efficient. We don't waste time picking through garbage." The neighbor explains that this isn't about efficiency, it's about collective environmental responsibility and legal compliance. He counters with, "But realistically, who's checking?" as if he's discovered a loophole in reality. The neighbor informs him that actually, yes, building management does check, and fines are issued. He mutters something about recycling police and government overreach. 2 weeks later, he receives a warning letter and a €50 fine for repeated violations. He posts on Reddit asking if this is legal. The entire German subreddit confirms it is. He continues to believe this is oppression. At a birthday party in Stuttgart, an American exchange student arrives empty-handed, expecting cake and festivities organized by the host. Instead, she discovers the birthday person has brought an entire homemade Schwarzwälder Kirschtorte and is serving slices to all the guests. She asks in genuine confusion, "Wait, you made your own birthday cake?" The birthday woman smiles and explains that in Germany, the birthday person typically provides the cake or treats as a gesture of thanks for everyone celebrating with them. The American responds, "That's backwards. On your birthday, people are supposed to do things for you. That's literally the point of birthdays." She then launches into an explanation about how American birthday culture is actually more logical because the honoree shouldn't have to work on their special day. A German guy nearby says, "But you are celebrating with people you care about, so you share something with them." She replies, "Right, but they should bring me stuff because I was born. I didn't ask to share, I asked to be celebrated." The Germans politely nod while mentally filing this under American individualism has reached new frontiers. She leaves convinced that German birthdays are a scam. The birthday woman cuts extra-large slices for everyone else. At a cafe in Heidelberg, a Texas tourist finishes his coffee and sits there scrolling through his phone for 45 minutes. The waiter has cleared the cup, brought the check, and is now wiping tables nearby with increasing aggression. Finally, the American waves him over and says, "Hey man, I'm gonna need another hour here, I've got some emails to finish." The waiter responds that the cafe is quite full and other guests are waiting. The American looks around at the 3 empty tables and says, I don't see anyone waiting. And in America, once you sit down, that table is yours for as long as you want. That's customer service. The waiter explains that in Germany, lingering after you've finished isn't expected, especially when you've only ordered 1 coffee 90 minutes ago. The American launches into a speech about how American cafes understand that ambience is part of the product, and that's why Starbucks dominates globally. The waiter listens with the expression of someone watching paint dry in real time, then says, "Perhaps Starbucks is more suitable for your needs." The American huffs, leaves a 6-cent tip, and writes a Google review about rushing customers. The waiter reads it aloud to his co-workers during their break. They laugh for 10 minutes straight. A Seattle food blogger walks into a traditional Bavarian restaurant in Nuremberg and scans the room for seating. Every table has at least 1 free chair, but they're all occupied by actual groups. She approaches a foretop where 2 people are sitting and asks if she can join. They look uncomfortable but agree. She immediately starts live-streaming her meal, narrating every detail of the schnitzel preparation to her phone. The couple tries to have a conversation, but she keeps interrupting to ask them to be quieter because she's recording. One of them politely suggests she might want to find a different table if she needs silence. She responds, "Actually, shared tables are a German thing, so technically you're supposed to be okay with this." The woman explains that yes, table sharing happens when restaurants are full, but typically people share in companionable silence, not while filming content. The blogger says, "Well, in America we embrace transparency and authenticity, which is why influencer culture works." She continues filming. The couple eats faster than humanly possible and leave. She posts about how Germans are camera shy and stuck in the past. The restaurant owner sees the video and institutes a no filming policy. Business improves. An American student in Cologne walks into a Spatkoff at 9 p.m. on Sunday, expecting to grab snacks and beer for a party. The doors are locked. Sein Rieds geschlossen, Sonntag. She pulls on the door repeatedly, as if it might be a mistake. A passing local tells her that most stores are closed on Sundays due to Ladenschlusssets, laws protecting workers' rest day. She responds, "That's insane. What if you need something?" He gestures toward the Spatkoff and explains that these smaller shops are an exception and usually open, but not today. She says, "In America, stores are open 24/7 because we believe in consumer freedom. This is why European economies are struggling." He stares at her with the exhausted patience of someone who's had this conversation before. She demands to know what people do in emergencies. He explains that people plan ahead, and actual emergencies are handled by pharmacies and gas stations, which have exemptions. She insists this system is anti-consumer and probably violates some UN charter about commerce. He walks away mid-sentence. She orders delivery from a Lieferdienst and pays triple the normal price. She still believes she's proven a point about capitalism. At a wine tasting in the Rhineland, a Colorado sommelier arrives with a group of German enthusiasts. When the first wine is poured, she swirls dramatically, sniffs, and then loudly declares, "Okay, so what I'm getting here is notes of elderflower with a hint of diesel, which is honestly concerning." The German vintner blinks twice and explains that Rieslings from this region often have a petroleum note that's considered desirable and indicates age. She interrupts, "Right, but in American wine culture, diesel means the wine has gone bad. This would never fly at a Napa tasting." The vintner explains, with admirable restraint, that petrol note is a characteristic of aged Riesling and is specifically sought after by connoisseurs. She waves this away and says, "Sure, but objectively speaking, gasoline smell in wine is a flaw. That's just chemistry." She pulls out her phone to Google it, finds one American wine blog that supports her claim, and shows it to the table as if she's submitted a dissertation. The vintner says, In Germany, we have been making wine for 2,000 years. She responds, and in America, we perfected it in 200. The rest of the group quietly moves to a different section of the tasting room. She finishes the entire bottle herself while narrating her Instagram story about teaching Germans about their own wine. The vintner later describes this day as emotionally exhausting. His wife agrees. At a train station in Leipzig, a Boston consultant rushes onto an RE4 regional train without a ticket, figuring she'll buy one from the conductor. 15 minutes into the ride, a controller approaches and asks for her ticket. She explains she's happy to buy one now. He informs her that tickets must be purchased before boarding, and riding without one is a €60 fine. She laughs and says, "That seems excessive for an honest mistake. In America, you can buy tickets on the train." He explains that this is Germany, not America, and the honor system requires pre-purchase. She escalates quickly, insisting that any reasonable transit system would allow onboard sales, and that this policy is designed to trap tourists. He remains completely unmoved and processes the fine. She demands to speak to his supervisor, apparently forgetting she's on a moving train. He informs her that his supervisor will say the exact same thing, as this is federal law, not personal preference. She threatens to report this to the American embassy as a travel rights violation. He wishes her luck with that. She pays the fine while muttering about German efficiency being a myth. At her hotel, she tells everyone who'll listen that German trains are a scam. A local overhears and says, "Or you could have bought the ticket." She blocks him on sight. A Miami architect arrives in Berlin for a conference and decides to drive to Potsdam. She rents a car, sets her GPS, and merges onto the Autobahn doing exactly 65 miles per hour in the left lane. Within 2 minutes, a BMW is 3 feet from her bumper, flashing its lights like a disco. She taps her brakes to teach him a lesson about tailgating. The BMW honks, swerves around her, and speeds off at what looks like 140 miles per hour. This happens 4 more times in 10 minutes. At a rest stop, a German driver approaches and explains that the left lane is for passing only, and driving slowly there causes dangerous situations. She responds, "Actually, I was going the speed limit, which is how roads work. Maybe Germans should learn patience." He explains there is no speed limit on this section, and left lane camping is both illegal and incredibly dangerous. She says, "In America, you can drive in any lane at any speed, and it's fine because we believe in lane equality." He looks at her the way you'd look at someone trying to microwave aluminum foil. She insists that the German system is aggressive and designed for men who need to feel powerful in their cars. He abandons the conversation. She drives back to Berlin at 70 kilometers per hour in the left lane the entire way, causing 3 near accidents. She writes a blog post about toxic Autobahn culture. German drivers screenshot it and share it in automotive forums for months. At a university orientation in Freiburg, an American exchange student introduces herself to classmates by explaining that she's basically German because her great-great-grandmother was from Munich. A local student politely asks if she speaks German. She responds, "Not yet, but it's in my blood, so it'll come naturally." The local student nods slowly, processing this. The American continues, explaining that she plans to get a German flag tattoo and feels a deep connection to the culture despite never having visited before this week. Another German student asks what aspects of German culture she's most interested in. She says, "Definitely Oktoberfest and those little cookie houses at Christmas." The students exchange glances. One ventures that Germany has a complex literary tradition, world-leading engineering sectors, and a difficult historical relationship with nationalism. She waves this off, saying, "Right, but the fun stuff is what really defines a culture." She then asks if Germans wear lederhosen regularly. The students explain that's specific to Bavaria and mostly for tourists. She argues that her grandmother definitely said all Germans wore them. One student gently explains that regional stereotypes aren't national identity. She accuses them of gatekeeping their own culture. The German students develop a group chat specifically to discuss this conversation. She never gets invited to study group. In a Stuttgart grocery store, a Los Angeles screenwriter approaches a shelf of mineral water and asks an employee, in English, "Do you work here?" The employee responds in German, "Ja." The American repeats, louder and slower, "Do you work here?" The employee, in English, confirms he does. She asks where the flat water is. He points to a section labeled Stills Wasser right next to her. She looks at it and says, "This is sparkling." He explains that Stills is still, non-carbonated water. She insists this can't be right because in America, all bottled water is flat unless specifically labeled sparkling, so the logic should be universal. He repeats that this is still water. She grabs a bottle, reads the label, which is entirely in German, and says, "How am I supposed to know what this says?" He offers to translate. She cuts him off with, "You know what? In America, stores have English labels so everyone can understand. That's what happens in advanced countries." He stares at her with the emotional energy of someone who's worked retail for a decade. She buys the water, which is indeed still. At the register, she asks the cashier, "Why doesn't Germany have English labels?" The cashier, without looking up, says, "Because this is Germany." The screenwriter later posts on Facebook about how difficult Germans are. 300 comments from Germans say, "Skill issue." Last month, I watched an American family eat dinner at an outdoor beer garden in Munich. They finished their meals, stacked their plates, left a 3% tip, and started packing up their belongings. The waiter came over to present the bill. The dad waved him off, saying, "We already paid." The waiter explained they hadn't paid yet. German restaurants don't bring the check until requested. The dad insisted he'd put money on the table. The waiter pointed out that was a tip, not payment for the meal. The dad's face went through 5 stages of confusion before landing on defensive. He said, "Well, in America, you leave money on the table and that's payment. This is a communication issue." The waiter, with superhuman patience, explained the bill still needed to be settled. The family paid, left no additional tip, and walked away muttering about European service industry scams. The waiter collected the €3, split it with the kitchen staff, and bought exactly half a beer. That's the pattern. Americans arrive expecting the world to adjust to their logic. Germans continue operating exactly as they have for generations. Neither side learns anything. Both sides leave convinced the other is unreasonable. And somehow civilization continues. Barely.